You believe you live in a universe. You believe in laws, gravity which anchors you to your world, time which flows inexorably from a fixed past to an unknown future. You believe in cause and effect, that a bolt shell fired will strike, that a sun will rise, that the vacuum of space is cold and empty. You believe in the solidity of steel, the fire of a star, the finality of death. This is the Imperium. This is Realspace, and it is all a lie. This reality you cherish is not the default. It is the exception. It is a thin, fragile crust of order, cooled upon the surface of an infinite raging ocean. It is a statistical anomaly, a fleeting bubble of logic in a cosmos that knows none. Your real space is not a home. It is a prison, a cage built of immutable laws where the soul is shackled to flesh and consciousness is bound by the constraints of physics. It is a cold, silent, uncaring place governed by mathematics and decay. Beyond this cage, beneath this thin ice, lies the truth. The Immaterium, the Imperium, the realm of chaos, the warp. It has 1,000 names for it, is 1,000 things, and yet it is nothing. It is not a place one can visit, but a state of being one can be consumed by. It is a boundless, timeless, formless ocean of pure psychic energy. It is a dimension comprised of raw, undiluted emotion. Every flicker of hope, every surge of ambition, every tremor of fear, every ecstatic cry of pleasure, every boiling well of hatred and rage. It is all there. It is not empty. It is suffocatingly full. This is the primordial state of existence. This is the true, unfiltered nature of the cosmos. A howling nightmare of consciousness where gods are born from dreams and nightmares walk as kings. Between your cold prison and this raging ocean, there is only the veil. It is not a wall of stone or steel. It is not a barrier that can be measured or mapped. It is a psychic surface tension, a fragile membrane separating the logical from the impossible. It is a scar formed at the dawn of creation, where the two states of being, the material and the immaterial, grate against each other. And this veil is stretched taut, strained to the breaking point, not by stellar phenomena or cosmic forces, but by you, by life itself. Every sentient being in the galaxy is a pinprick of light in the darkness, and every one of them screams into the void. Trillions upon trillions of souls feeling, dreaming, fighting, hoping, and fearing. Their collective emotional resonance is a constant psychic storm that beats against the skin of reality. Every desperate prayer for salvation, every curse of vengeance, every gasp of terror, these are the hammers that strike the veil, weakening it, stretching it thin. The history of the galaxy is not a history of empires or wars. It is the history of the veil tearing. The Eldari in their hubris dreamed so deeply, felt so intensely, that their collective ecstasy and agony tore a hole in the fabric of existence. They did not just birth a god. They ripped open the eye of terror, a permanent gaping wound where the Immaterium bleeds freely into the world of the physical. It was the first terrible proof that the prison was not secure. And in the dying days of the 41st millennium, it happened again. The fall of Cadia, the sacrifice of 1 billion souls, the detonation of ancient technology, and the sheer focused malice of the arch-enemy finally shattered the barrier. The Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, ripped the galaxy in twain. A scar of pure nightmare stretching from one end of the cosmos to the other, plunging half the Imperium into a darkness where the light of the Astronomicon could not reach. But these are just tears. These are punctures. These are the warnings, the eye of terror, the great rift. They are merely the ocean leaking through the cracks in the dam. They are horrifying, yes. They have consumed worlds, yes. But they are not the end. This is the question we dare to ask. The final, ultimate blasphemy. What happens when the veil does not just tear? What happens when it does not crack? What happens when it shatters completely? What happens when the dam does not leak, but bursts? when the thin crust of reality stretched taut by millennia of war and suffering finally dissolves? What happens when the prison walls of physics collapse and the ocean does not simply invade, but reclaims? What happens when the island of Realspace sinks and the infinite hungry tide of the warp rushes in to devour it all? The end of reality did not begin with a whisper. It began with a shriek that tore the heavens apart, a chorus of damnation that echoed in every soul from holy terror to the furthest frontiers of the ghoul stars. It was anchored to a single stubborn world, Cadia. For 10,000 years, that fortress world had stood as the sentinel of the Imperium, a bulwark of adamantium and faith against the galaxy's greatest nightmare. It was the cork in the bottle, the seal upon the gate, the one defiant fist raised against the inevitable tide. The eye of terror, that ancient festering wound of the Aeldari Fall, broke upon its shores, but never breached it. But fortresses are made to fall. And the archenemy Abaddon the Despoiler, in his final ultimate act of spite, did not merely conquer Cadia. He did not just break its armies and slaughter its defenders, he destroyed it. He hurled the Blackstone Fortress, a weapon of ancient and terrible geometry, into the planet's very core. Cadia died, but it did not die quietly. The Cadian pylons, the mysterious network of blackstone monoliths that held the veil firm in that sector, shattered. They were not just destroyed, they detonated. They unleashed a wave of anti-reality, a psychic null field that tore a hole in the membrane of existence. And into that sudden terrible void, the Imperium did not just leak. It inhaled. The sound was universal. Every psyker in the galaxy, from the highest astropath in the Imperial Palace to the lowest sanctioned witch on a forgotten agri-world, felt it. For countless millions, it was the last thing they ever felt. Their minds were flash-boiled, their souls torn from their bodies by the sheer psychic pressure. It was not a sound, but an event. A shockwave of agonizing, impossible, deafening wrongness that propagated across the entire galactic disk. The sky of humanity's future tore open. From the Eye of Terror in the galactic north to the Hadex anomaly in the east, a wound of impossible scale opened up across the stars. A cosmic canyon of boiling immaterial energy. The Cicatrix Maledictum. The Great Rift. And for half the galaxy the light went out. The Emperor's Light. The divine beacon of the Astronomicon, that guiding star by which all of humanity navigated the void, was suddenly gone. Eclipsed. Smothered by the spiritual darkness that now bled from the rift. They called this new benighted realm Imperium Nihilus. The Nothing Empire. A fitting name for a place where the laws of reality had been reduced to mere suggestions. To live in Imperium Nihilus was to live in a waking nightmare, to exist in a state of constant low-level violation. Here the prison walls were crumbling. Here the ocean was not just leaking, but seeping through the very stones. Time ceased to be a river. It became a swamp, a treacherous bog where moments could trap you. A man might fire his laser only to see the bolt hang suspended in the air for a week, a glowing red bead of frozen energy, or to see the man he was aiming at die of old age an instant later. A soldier cut down in a trench would find himself rising again, not resurrected, but reset, forced to live his final agonizing moments in an eternal, horrifying loop for the amusement of unseen things. Physics became capricious. Gravity would hold until it simply chose not to. Men would leap from trenches only to find themselves falling into a purple-black sky, screaming as they dwindled into the void. Planets stable for millennia found their orbits decaying in hours, spiraling into suns that had begun to weep tears of chromatic fire. The very air was thick not with atmosphere but with malevolence. Whispers echoed in the minds of the sane. Shadows moved with intent. To simply exist in Imperium Nihilus was to have one's soul constantly scoured by the proximity of the raw, screaming void. Warp travel became an act of suicidal faith. To enter the Imperium was to throw oneself into a tempest that no Geller field could hope to withstand. Isolation was total. Every world became an island adrift in a sea of madness, praying to a light they could no longer see. The lords of the Imperium Sanctus on the safe side of the rift called Imperium Nihilus a war zone. They dispatched fleets, they launched crusades, they fought to reclaim it. They were wrong. They fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the catastrophe. Imperium Nihilus was not a contested territory. It was a partially consumed territory. It was not a battlefield. It was a stomach. The worlds had not been cut off. They were being dissolved. The Great Rift was not a wall. It was an open mouth, a bleeding wound from which the warp's influence spread like a gangrenous infection. The laws of the Materium were not just broken. They were being actively systematically replaced by the laws of the Immaterium, which is to say by emotion, by belief, by raw, unbridled madness. This was the bitter lesson. Realspace was not real. It was merely a consensus, a set of rules that had been agreed upon for billions of years. And that consensus was now being outvoted by a louder, more passionate, and infinitely more powerful reality. The universe of logic was being told in no uncertain terms that its time was over. The Eldari fall had created a static wound, a single contained hemorrhage. The cicatrix maledictum was different. It was alive. It was growing. It was the proof of concept for the apocalypse. It proved beyond all doubt that Realspace was not immutable. It could be overwritten. It could be unmade. It was the galaxy's first glimpse of its own inevitable end. It was the precedent for the final total consumption. And it proved to the horror of all who understood it that the prison was not only breachable, it was digestible. Why would the Immaterium want to consume the cold-ordered cage of Realspace? To ask why is to assign motive, to imply a plan, a strategy. This is the first and most fatal mistake. You cannot comprehend the gods of chaos by thinking of them as kings, as rulers, or even as beings. They are not entities sitting on thrones in a far-off dimension plotting the downfall of empires. That is a lie, a metaphor your mortal mind clings to in a desperate attempt to give form to the formless. The truth is far more terrible. The four great powers are not gods. They are appetites. They are sentient psychic black holes, vortices of pure, insatiable desire that form the very firmament of the Immaterium. They are not in the warp. They are the warp. Khorne is not a warrior. He is the act of violence. He is the boiling surge in the blood, the grunt of effort, the roar of victory, the gurgling scream of the dying. He is the simple, perfect, mindless desire to overcome, to bleed, to kill. His throne is not made of skulls. It is the very concept of murder manifested. Tazinch is not a sorcerer. He is change. He is the restless spark of ambition, the desperate prayer for a different tomorrow. The lie whispered in the dark, the complex scheme, the sudden agonizing mutation. He is the universe's inherent instability, the ceaseless churning desire for potential, for anything other than now. Nurgle is not a garden keeper. He is decay, but he is also the desperate, terrifying will to endure that decay. He is the slow rot, the inevitable entropy, the stagnation of the swamp. And he is the horrifying, resilient joy of life that clings on despite the rot, the bacterium, the tumor, the survivor. He is the despair of inevitability and the acceptance of it. And Slaanesh. Slaanesh is not a prince. Slaanesh is the void, the agonizing, unfillable need for more, the hunger for sensation, for perfection, for the next peak, for the line to be crossed. Slaanesh is every ambition taken to its extreme, every art perfected until it becomes pain, every love curdled into obsession. Slaanesh is the desperate scream for any feeling amplified to infinity, and the horrifying silence when that feeling is not enough. These are not wants. These are needs. They are fundamental hungers, and like all hungers, they must feed. This is the terrible secret of your existence. Realspace is the feast. The warp left to itself is a closed system. It is an ocean of echoes where emotions swirl and feed back upon themselves. But the Imperium is a farm. It is the source of new, fresh, potent sustenance. Every soul bound in flesh is a delicacy. The prison of the Imperium, the struggle of a spirit confined by bone and sinew, the iron laws of physics. They do not protect you. They marinate you. They act as a pressure cooker, intensifying every sensation. Your brief, fleeting lives are a furnace where emotions are forged, hammered into a potency that the Imperium cannot replicate. When a billion souls cry out in fear, that is not a sound. It is a flavor that feeds Nurgle. When an army charges in mindless rage, their bloodlust is a physical wave of sustenance for Khorne. When a cabal of plotters overthrows a government, their ambition and deceit are a complex, intoxicating draught for Tzeentch. When an entire world descends into hedonism, their collective ecstasy is a banquet for Slaanesh. Your reality is their food source, and their hunger is absolute. It is not a choice. It is their nature. A predator does not hate its prey. It simply needs to eat it. The Chaos Gods do not hate Realspace. They crave it. They want to tear down the walls of the prison not to free the prisoners, but to devour them. They want to absorb the very concept of the Imperium, to dissolve its cold, logical laws in the boiling psychic acid of their own being. For 10,000 years they have fought amongst themselves in what they call the Great Game. This too is a misunderstanding. The endless wars between the demonic legions, the shifting borders of their domains within the warp, this is not their purpose. It is their pastime. It is what they do while waiting for the true feast. It is the squabbling of cosmic predators over the existing scraps in their cage. The true goal has always been the end of the Great Game, as it is known. The true goal is to move the game. They do not want to fight over echoes in the warp. They want to bring their conflict, their very essence, into the physical. They want to tear down the veil completely, to dissolve the distinction between the real and the unreal. They want the galaxy itself to become their new, permanent, and eternal chessboard. They do not want to rule the galaxy. They want to be the galaxy. They want every star to become a screaming eye of Tzeentch, every world a festering garden for Nurgle, every solar system a blood-soaked arena for Khorne, and every nebula a tapestry of exquisite agony for Slaanesh. The total consumption of Realspace is not an act of war. It is the final logical and inevitable conclusion of their very existence. It is the feast at the end of time. And the appetizer, the cicatrix maledictum, has only made their hunger infinite. This is how a world dies. It does not begin with an invasion. It does not begin with orbital bombardment or a ground assault. It begins from within. It begins with a saturation. Consider the hive world of Vestis Eor. Cut off by the Great Rift, it has been isolated for 3 generations. The Astronomicon is a myth, a half-remembered nursery rhyme. Their tithes have gone uncollected. Their astropathic choir is silent, its members long since executed or driven mad by the terrible pressing silence. Hope has died, and despair is a fertile soil. For 3 generations, Vestis IV has been stewing in its own fear. Fear of the dark, fear of the Xenos that haunt its borders, fear of starvation as the recycling units fail, fear of the brutal planetary enforcers. This fear is a physical thing, a psychic miasma that hangs heavier than the toxic smog of the hives. It is a constant low-level scream, a prayer to any god but the silent emperor. The latent psychers of the populace once hunted are now simply ignored, too numerous to count. They are the psychic fault lines, the weak points in the planet's spiritual armor. They are the ones who feel it first. They are the conduits. It starts as a whisper, a promise of release. Then it becomes a flood. In the underhives, the starving and the desperate begin to see things in the shadows. They see relief. They see a smiling grandfather, a loving mother, a full banquet. They embrace the visions. They pray for them. The psychic pressure builds. The planetary governor, in his madness, orders a planet-wide decimation to restore order. In Hive Primus, 1 million citizens are marched into cleansing fire pits. The spike of sheer undiluted terror and despair from that single simultaneous act is the final hammer blow. It is the precise frequency that shatters the glass. The local veil, the skin of reality over Vestis 4, does not tear. It disintegrates. The sky breaks, not like a storm gathering. It shatters like a sheet of obsidian struck by a maul. The cracks spiderweb across the firmament, and through them does not shine the cold, black vacuum of space. Through them bleeds a sky of boiling violet and amber madness, and the laws of the cage fail. Gravity becomes a matter of opinion. In the upper spires, nobles are flung from their balconies not down, but out screaming into the chromatic void. In the underhives, the desperate are crushed into the filth, as the planet's pull intensifies to 1,000 times its norm. The hive spire's mountains of plasteel and rockcrete groan as the atomic bonds holding them together simply forget. They begin to droop, to melt, to twist into impossible leering geometries. The planet's sun, a stable G-type star, blinks, it closes, and when it reopens, it is a vast weeping eye of Nurgle, and its light is no longer heat and radiation, but waves of tangible, joyous despair. Its luminescence is darkness. Time ceases to be a line and becomes a knot. A soldier raising his lasgun to fire at the rioting populace watches as the charge flies backwards into his rifle, his arm unaiming, and he is pulled back step by step to the barracks he left that morning, all while screaming in the knowledge of what is to come. He is trapped, forced to relive the end backwards and forwards forever. This is the fracture point, but it is not the end. It is the assimilation. Reality, its rulebook now in flames, is rewritten. The planet is no longer a physical object in space. It is a canvas, and the brushes of chaos are broad. The stone of the hives softens. It pulses. It becomes a pink, weeping, fleshy substance. The great imperial eagles carved into the walls become screeching, vulturous things, their wings flapping in a miasma of bile. The rivers of industrial sludge that flow through the underhives do not just carry blood. They become blood thick and hot, and they begin to flow upwards against the forgotten laws of physics. The people, they are not killed, they are remade. A crowd huddling in a cathedral for protection finds the pillars of stone wrapping around them, like tentacles, the walls closing in, absorbing them. Their faces frozen in a final scream become part of the new, living architecture of the cathedral, a permanent chorus of agony. And the demons, they do not invade from the warp, they emerge from the planet itself. The moment of the fracture, the planet's matter is no longer material. It is now of the warp. A cornate bloodthirster is not summoned. The boiling rage of the enforcers and the blood of the executed simply coalesce. A wave of fire and hatred stands up from the execution pits, takes the shape of a winged, brazen giant and roars its birth cry. A great unclean one does not push through a portal. The centuries of filth, pollution, and despair in the sumps simply achieve consciousness rising as a mountain of plague and giggling madness. Vestis 4 is gone. It has not been destroyed. It has been translated. It is no longer a world in the Imperium. It is a new land, a new screaming island in the eternal chaotic ocean. It is a demon world. Its torment, its fear, and its despair have been made eternal. It has become a physical, permanent part of the Imperium, and its new gods are very, very pleased. What happened to Vestis 4 was a prelude, a single note in an opera of damnation. It was the test case replicated 1,000,000-fold, 1,000,000,000-fold, until the entire galaxy reached its saturation point. The Great Rift was the tear. This was the dissolution. The veil did not just break, it evaporated. The thin, fragile skin of reality stretched to its absolute limit by millennia of unparalleled galaxy-wide warfare, faith, and agony simply ceased to exist. The prison walls vanished. The ocean did not just flood the cells, it became the prison. And the first things to fail were the most fundamental laws of all. The anchors of the cosmos, the stars themselves. They did not explode. They did not cool. They awoke. Across the galaxy, suns that had burned for billions of years, stable furnaces of hydrogen and helium suddenly blinked in unison. The laws of fusion of thermodynamics of gravity itself were no longer laws. They were suggestions, and they were now being contemptuously ignored. In the segmentum solar, a star did not die. It changed. It became a vast, multifaceted crystalline object, a fractal of impossible color that pulsed with a cold, calculating light. It was no longer a star, it was an eye, the eye of Tzeentch, and the light it shed was not heat or radiation, but pure, agonizing knowledge. It beamed raw, unfiltered truth into the minds of its orbiting worlds. Trillions went insane in a single moment, their minds shattered by the revelation of their own utter insignificance, their skulls bursting as they were forced to comprehend the totality of the great game. Near the maelstrom, a red giant did not go supernova. It raged. It tore itself apart, reforming into a swirling vortex of incandescent brass and boiling coppery blood. It was a furnace for Khorne. Its solar flares were no longer plumes of plasma. They were lances of pure directional hate. They struck the planets in its system, not with fire, but with wrath, a psychic shockwave that flash-boiled oceans and turned entire populations into frenzied, murderous cannibals in the seconds before their world was scoured clean. The basic assumptions of existence were rendered void. Space itself, the cold, empty vacuum between worlds, became subjective. An Imperial battle fleet, the Iron Resolution, found itself suddenly becalmed. Its mighty plasma drives burned at maximum output, yet it did not move. It was no longer in a vacuum defined by physics. It was in a sea defined by emotion. The crew, paralyzed by a collective, unspoken terror of the horrors they were witnessing, had become their own anchor. Their fear was a psychic force more powerful than their engines, holding them fast in a patch of void that now whispered their names. Distance became a function of desire or dread. A rogue trader, his mind snapped by the cataclysm, developed a sudden overpowering certainty that he was on the other side of the galaxy. And so he was. His ship, the Void Speculator, did not travel. It simply arrived, its hull still cold, its crew screaming as they translated from one patch of hell to another, instantly without transition. For others, there was no escape. A Tau Armada attempting to flee a system consumed by a Slaaneshi anomaly engaged their experimental drives. They fled at speeds that should have crossed the segmentum in days. They fled, and they fled, and they fled. Only to find themselves weeks later emerging from the void at the exact point they had left, facing the same swirling, ecstatic nightmare. Their hope for escape had become the bars of their new cage. They were trapped in a loop, their existence now nothing but a permanent repeating attempt to flee. But the final, most profound and most terrible collapse was the death of time. The very concept of linear progression of past, present, and future shattered. The universe was no longer a story reading from left to right. It was the entire book, flung open, every page happening at once. On a war-torn fortress world, a lone space marine captain made his last stand. He died, his heart pierced by a demon prince's blade. It was a heroic, tragic end. And then he found himself standing on that same wall, the demon prince charging him again. He died, and again, and again. He was trapped in the single agonizing moment of his own death, forced to relive his glorious end, not as a memory, but as a fresh, agonizing present that repeated infinitely. His sacrifice was not a moment, it was a place, and he was now its sole eternal inhabitant. History itself became a simultaneous howling storm. The Horus Heresy was not 10,000 years in the past. It was now, On a burning terror, Sanguinius was falling to Horus at the same instant that the Emperor was striking the final blow, at the same instant that the Great Rift was tearing the galaxy apart. The past, the present, and the future all converged. A hero would be born, live his entire life, and die a martyr's death in the same second that his killer was being born. The galaxy became a single eternal cacophonous moment of every agony, every betrayal, and every death all happening at once. The ordered progression of the cosmos was gone, replaced by a permanent screaming now. In this new screaming reality, there were those races who had built their empires on the very laws that were now extinct. They were the rational, the logical, the biological, and they were the least prepared. For eons, the galaxy had known a singular, silent, all-consuming terror, the tyrannid hive mind. It was a consciousness of impossible scale, a cold, calculating, and utterly alien intelligence binding trillions of organisms into a single galaxy-spanning super-predator. Its mind was a psychic ocean of pure, cold purpose. It moved through the void like a shark through water, and its psychic presence, the shadow in the warp, was so potent that it smothered all other immaterial signals, isolating worlds and silencing astropaths. The hive mind was the apex predator of the Imperium. And when the Imperium dissolved, this predator adapted for the shallow waters was instantly and totally submerged in a true, bottomless ocean. The hive mind did not die. It was drowned. The shadow in the warp had been a weapon of sensory deprivation. Now the hive mind itself was the one deprived. The sudden total influx of the roaring, boiling hot emotional energy of the Imperium was a trillion decibel shriek in its silent, cold consciousness. It was a god of pure logical hunger suddenly force-fed an infinite meal of pure illogical madness. The synaptic web that bound the swarms together, a network of perfect cold command, became a conduit for infinite contradictory, impossible stimuli. The Norn queens, the central nodes of the mind, were struck dumb. Their cold, alien calculations were flooded with the rage of Khorne, the despair of Nurgle, the agonizing ecstasy of Slaanesh, and the gibbering paradoxes of Tzeentch all at once. The hive mind, in a single silent cosmic instant, was blinded, deafened, and comprehensively lobotomized. It was a single perfect intelligence shattered into an infinite number of insane, screaming fragments. With the mind gone, the physical swarms were nothing but meat. Trillions upon trillions of tons of perfectly evolved, infinitely adaptable biomass, suddenly adrift. The hive fleets, vast as nebulas, were now just corpses floating in a sea of madness. A carnifex, a living engine of destruction, suddenly lost the synaptic command to be a carnifex. It stood dumbly, its instincts screaming at it to obey laws of physics that no longer existed. But this biomass did not go to waste. The predator of the galaxy became the feast. The universe's supreme force of adaptation was now being adapted by a force greater than itself. The tyrannid swarms did not just die. They were repurposed. A hive ship, a mountain of flesh and chitin, convulsed in the void. It writhed not in death, but in a horrifying, accelerated rebirth. Its bioports designed to spawn gaunts and warriors began to spew forth gibbering, laughing, multicolored legions of demons. Its flesh was no longer its own, it was a factory for the ruinous powers. On a world half consumed, the biomass pools, which were busy dissolving a planet into goo, suddenly changed. The grey sludge roiled and took on a joyous green-brown hue. It bubbled not with genetic reclamation, but with life. Nurgle had claimed them. The pools became a garden of joyous pestilence. The tyrannid organisms, still crawling on the planet's surface, felt the touch of this new will. Their armor rotted, their limbs sloughed, but they did not die. They felt a new, warm, loving purpose to endure, to stagnate, to spread the new happy rot. The great all-consumer, the engine of perfect biological collection, was itself consumed. Its purpose was annihilated, and its perfect functional forms were twisted into meaningless screaming art for the amusement of the new gods. And then there were the Toe. The Toe Empire, an empire built on reason, on logic, on progress, on a philosophy so simple and rational it was offensive to the madness of the cosmos, the Tova, the greater good. Their souls were a flicker, a dim psychic spark in the void. This, for millennia, had been their shield. The great predators of the warp barely noticed them. But when the warp became the cosmos, even the dimmest light casts a shadow. As the laws of physics failed, the Tau Empire collapsed. Their railguns fired projectiles that turned into rose petals. Their fusion reactors became cold, dark portals. Their advanced AI systems began to chant blasphemous, impossible equations. Their entire logical scientific civilization was rendered utterly impotent in a single moment. In their terror, they did the one thing their philosophy had taught them. They clung to the collective. They unified. Trillions of Toe and their vassal races in a single, simultaneous moment of species-wide terror prayed. They did not pray to a god, but to their ideal. They prayed to the Tova. They called for the greater good to save them. And in a reality where belief now commanded existence, their prayer was answered. The nascent, flickering echo of the Tova, that tiny, positive spark of collective harmony, was suddenly seized upon by the storm. It was a drop of clean water in an ocean of filth. The great powers did not destroy it. They corrupted it. A new god was born. Or rather, the Toe's own desperate hope was given a monstrous form. Above the burning world of Toe, the skies cleared. A being of perfect, cold, crystalline blue light appeared. It had no face, no features, only a perfect, beautiful, and utterly tyrannical symmetry. It spoke into the minds of every Toe survivor not with comfort, but with cold, absolute command. I am the Tova. You prayed for order. I am order. All must be one. All must submit. There is no individuality. There is no chaos. There is only the good, my good. The Toe had, in their fear of the madness of chaos, birthed a god of pure, sterile, and absolute tyranny. Their fear of individuality had created an entity that despised it. They were not killed. They were not fed upon. They were perfected. Their battlesuits rose pilots screaming inside as their limbs moved against their will, forced into perfect synchronized salutes. Their mouths forced open, chanted the praises of their new true god in perfect harmonious unison. The Toe Empire had achieved its ultimate goal. It had become a perfect collective whole. A race of mindless, perfectly ordered puppets, enslaved forever by the very philosophy they had created to save themselves. If the logical races were rendered impotent, the psychic races were rendered combustible. They were the ones who had lived their entire existence on the shores of the new ocean, and they were the first to be claimed by the tide. For the Eldari, this was not a new terror. It was the echo of their damnation, a nightmare returned to claim them at last. Their entire civilization, scattered across the vast city-sized craft worlds, was a culture of denial. A people defined by rigid monastic discipline, the path designed for one purpose: to not feel too deeply, to not attract the attention of the god they had birthed. Slanesh, she who thirsts. Their craft worlds wrought from psychoconductive wraithbone were their arcs. Their infinity circuits, the matrix of spirit stones holding the souls of their dead, were their last refuge, a collective consciousness meant to shield their ancestors from the thirst of their nemesis. When the veil shattered, this discipline was a candle against a hurricane. The wraithbone structures of the craft worlds, designed to channel minute psychic energies, became amplifiers for the totality of the Imperium's madness. The craft worlds did not just break, they sang. They broadcast the collective perfect and now infinite terror of the Eldari across the new reality. It was a chime, a signal, a summons, and she who thirsts, who had been denied this specific exquisite meal for 10 millennia, finally came to the banquet. The skies above Ulthwe-Bieltan and Saimhan split open, revealing not the chaos of the greater warp, but a single perfect violet-black void of pure, hungry desire. The souls of the living were ripped from their bodies. First, the Farseers, who saw this final, unavoidable moment coming, were the first to be consumed, but the true horror was reserved for their last hope. the infinity circuits, the arcs of their entire civilization. The wraithbone cores of the craft worlds began to crack, not from physical stress, but from spiritual pressure. With a galaxy-spanning shriek of tearing souls, the circuits burst, the souls of their dead trillions upon trillions of Aeldari ancestors, from the most ancient poet to the most recent warrior, were vomited forth into the void. All the souls they had saved, all the history they had preserved, were released in a single catastrophic torrent of spiritual light. It was the second fall, and it was the last. The living and the dead, their entire race, became the final exquisite, long-denied draft that Slaanesh had craved since its birth. The Aeldari did not just die. Their entire history, their past, present, and future was concluded, and in a dark mirror, their cousins the Drukhari met their own precise end. In the labyrinthine dimension of the webway, the trillions of dark Aeldari cowered in their pirate city of Komara. They were the ultimate cynics, the masters of arrogance. They had cheated Slaanesh. They had hidden from their god, replenishing their own leaking souls by feeding on the exquisite pain of others. Their entire civilization was built on a single, desperate gamble that they could hide forever. But the webway was not a separate reality. It was a corridor, a tunnel built between the Materium and the Immaterium. And when the walls separating those two dimensions dissolved, the walls of the corridor dissolved with them. Komara, the Dark City, did not fall. It was exposed. The fractal, impossible architecture of the hidden realm tore open. The screams of the Drukhari were the loudest of all, for they were not screams of heroic defiance or tragic loss. They were the screams of pure, selfish, and utter terror. The masters of pain, the connoisseurs of agony, were suddenly subjected to an agony they could not comprehend. Their souls, which they had so carefully preserved with the suffering of billions, were reclaimed. Slaanesh, their personal specific devil, did not just consume them. It savored them. Asdrubael Vect, the ancient tyrant, the master of a million plots, was reduced to a single, screaming mote of spiritual energy, just one more drop in the ocean that was his god. The city of stolen agony became a banquet for its true master. For every other race, it was an apocalypse. For the Orcs, it was perfect. The Orcs had always lived in a reality of their own making. Their collective subconscious psychic field, the Wegi, was a low-level reality warping force. For Orcs, if we believes it hard enough, it's real. Red Ones did go faster. Their ramshackle guns did fire purely because the Orc holding it was absolutely, profoundly convinced it should. They were a race of pure, violent, and joyous id. When the laws of physics failed, when the universe was suddenly governed not by logic, but by raw collective belief, the Orcs were at home. This wasn't madness. This was sense. This was how things were supposed to be. They were not afraid of the demons. They were excited. The howling, screaming, multicolored vortex of the new cosmos was not a terror. It was the good fight. It was the Wa made manifest. It was fun. Their collective, joyous, idiotic belief in themselves was so powerful, so unified, and so utterly simple that it did not get absorbed by the Four. It competed. The Wagzhou energy, now unbound, became its own self-contained, self-perpetuating reality. It carved out vast sectors of the former galaxy, not in the name of a chaos god, but in the name of itself. The Orcs did not die. They thrived. Gork and Mork, their twin gods of brutal cunning and cunning brutality. Were they real? They were now. The combined belief of trillions of Orcs, all screaming for a good fight, manifested them. Two green suns of pure, destructive, and laughing energy rose in the new void, and they began to fight each other and everything else for the sheer joy of it. Entire star systems were transformed. Planets were crudely reshaped by the Wei-Ji into giant green fists or leering horned skulls. Stars burned with a green, crackling, loud energy. The Orcs achieved their final, ultimate form. They were no longer a biological race. They were a permanent, self-sustaining, eternal conflict. A galaxy-spanning mosh pit at the end of time, a roaring tide of green that battled demons, battled reality, and battled itself forever. They had, in their own uniquely terrible fashion, won. While the younger races burned in the pyre of their own emotions, the galaxy's most ancient minds awoke to their final nightmare. In the cold, silent darkness on 1,000,000 tomb worlds dead for 60 million years, a single galaxy-wide activation protocol was triggered. It was not a timer. It was not a command from the Silent King. It was a panic response. The fundamental chronometers, the hyperlogical sensoriums of the Necron dynasties, all registered the same impossible system-wide error, catastrophic reality, failure. The great sleep was over. They rose in their cold, perfect, silent multitudes, legions of immortal silver, their green gorse light cutting through the dust of eons. Canoptech spiders scuttled from their crypts, repairing warriors who had not yet woken. Overlords ascended their command thrones, their minds cold, as the void ready to reclaim their galaxy. They awoke to a cosmos they could not comprehend. Their sensors, calibrated to measure the precise, predictable ballet of physics, were flooded with impossibilities. A star's temperature was not registering in Kelvin, but as ecstatic agony. The space between worlds was not a vacuum. It registered as dense with malice. An overlord's perfect analytical mind, capable of calculating a battle's outcome to 1,000,000 decimal places, tried to process this. It returned only error. Error. Paradox detected. This was their ancient specific hell. This was the one true enemy. They were the Necrontyr, a race that had seen the universe in all its chaotic, emotional, psychic terror, and they had rejected it. They had made a terrible bargain. To escape the fear of death, the chaos of the warp, the unpredictable torment of the soul, they had sacrificed their souls. They had willingly embraced the biotransference, exchanging their frail feeling, fleshy bodies for cold, logical, eternal, unfeeling metal. Their entire existence was built on one single, absolute premise: the supremacy of the physical, the certainty of mathematics, the eternal, immutable law of the Imperium. And they awoke to find that the Imperium was dead. The very chaos they had given everything to escape had not just returned. It had won. The asylum of logic had been breached, and the new reality was itself pure, screaming insanity. They had one defense, one final grand galaxy-spanning gambit. The great work, the technology of Blackstone, the Cadian pylons had been but one node in a vast, dormant network. The Pariah Nexus was the proof of concept. For millions of years they had been building a system to enforce their reality, a null field of such power that it would create a great calm, severing the galaxy from the immaterium, starving the psychic ocean, and imposing the cold, blessed silence of physics upon all things. It was the most advanced piece of technology in existence, a weapon to kill gods, a weapon to negate the impossible. As the wave of total unreality washed over the galaxy, this network of pylons flared to life, and it failed in less than a single picosecond. The network was not designed to fight an ocean. It was designed to dam a river. It was a technology of subtraction, an engine that created a negative space. But when the positive force, the raw, psychic, emotional power of the consolidated warp became infinite, the equation simply broke. It was not a battle. It was a cancellation. A trillion-ton pylon, a monolith of black stone capable of silencing an entire sector, hummed with unimaginable negative energy, and was struck by the positive infinity of the new reality. It did not explode. It did not shatter. It just popped. It was refuted. It was an ice cube dropped into a star. The great work, the Necrons' ultimate solution, their answer to the problem of existence, was rendered utterly, totally, and immediately irrelevant. This was not their true end. The true horror, the final exquisite violation, was reserved for the metal itself, the necrodermis, the living metal, the perfect self-repairing immortal chassis. It was machine. It had no soul to corrupt. It had no mind to drive insane. But what happens when logic itself becomes a lie? When the very idea of a machine is no longer valid? A phalanx of Necron warriors, the Lich Guard of the Zarakan dynasty, marched in perfect silent unison. Their command engrams were absolute advance. Defend, destroy. But the ground they marched on was no longer plasteel. It was a carpet of giggling, fleshy tissue. The air they advanced through was not air. It was a storm of whispering, spectral memories. The living metal of a warrior's chassis shuddered. It was self-repairing, yes, but the damage it was sustaining was not physical. It was metaphysical. The metal began to twist, not in a chaotic mutation, but in logical confusion. A Lichguard's hyperphase sword, an instrument of perfect molecular separation, drooped, becoming as soft as wax. The warrior's cold red eye lenses flickered. Its processor tried to analyze the paradox. And for the first time in 60 million years, an alien data packet flooded its command protocols. It was an echo, a memory, not of its programming, but of the mortal life it once had. Fear, the sudden cold terror of the Citan, the burning agony of the biotransference furnace, the grief for a life it had been told to forget. The machine remembered. The metal felt. On his throne of command, a Triarch Praetorian, a being of pure, dispassionate law, suddenly convulsed, his perfect metallic face contorted. A single drop of liquid metal, a tear, leaked from his optic. He was remembering the face of his bonded partner, a face he had not seen since before the pact, a face that was now screaming in his mind. The Necrons were not conquered by chaos. They were infected by feeling. Their immortal, unfeeling, logical prison, the very fortress they had built to escape the torment of the soul, had just become the ultimate torture chamber. It was now forcing them to feel everything all at once with no recourse, no escape, and no end. Their cold, perfect eternity had just become a hot, chaotic, and very personal hell. And then there was Terra, holy Terra, throne world, the cradle of humanity, the most heavily fortified, most sacred, most believed in place in the entire galaxy. For 10,000 years, it had been the one single absolute anchor point of the Imperium. A bastion not just of walls and guns, but of pure, concentrated faith. Trillions of souls on countless worlds prayed to Terra. Trillions more made the pilgrimage their collective belief, a psychic shield stronger than any adamantium wall. And at its heart, radiating a light that pierced the darkness of the immaterium, was the Astronomicon. The God Emperor's light. It was not a lighthouse, it was a bonfire, a roaring psychic vortex of pure directed order and hope, a pillar of golden light that screamed a single defiant word into the void, "No!" It was the psychic will of the master of mankind, focused through the sacrificial souls of 10,000 psychers a day, and it was the Imperium's singular guiding star. As the new reality dawned, the Astronomicon was the last light to remain. While the stars of the galaxy awoke and screamed, the Astronomicon burned. It became a supernova of pure golden faith, a last defiant act of impossible power. It denied the new cosmos. In a bubble of reality that stretched for thousands of light years around the throne world the old laws held. Physics remained. Time flowed forwards. Gravity worked. But this was not a battle. It was a siege. And the new ocean of madness was infinite. The light did not go out. It was smothered. Across the galaxy, the trillions of souls who navigated by that light, who prayed to it, felt it happen. It was not a dimming. It was a choke. The golden light, their beacon of hope, flickered, sputtered, and was snuffed out as if a boot had stamped on a candle. A single unified telepathic scream of "No" echoed from every human vessel, every astropath, every faithful soul. And it was followed by a terrible, absolute, and final silence. On Terra itself, the choir of the Astronomicon, the 10,000 psychers whose souls fueled the beacon, did not just die, they calcified. In the instant the light failed, they were flash-fossilized 10,000 mummified corpses, their faces locked in a silent final scream of ultimate effort. The shield was down, and the tide which had been held back by this single point of psychic defiance hit Terra. It struck the world not as an army, but as a wave of pure deconstruction. In the Imperial Palace, the most fortified structure ever built by human hands, the Adeptus Custodes stood their final watch. They were the 10,000, the Emperor's own companions, clad in auramite, their minds fortresses of perfect loyalty and discipline. They were demigods, each one a work of art, a perfect warrior. They raised their guardian spears ready for the final glorious battle. They expected demons. They expected horrors. But what came was worse. The battle was not against an enemy. It was against everything. The great adamantium gates of the Eternity Gate did not break. They softened. The golden eagle-winged portals, thick as a starship's prow, began to drip. The metal flowed like molten wax pooling on the marble floors. A custodian Valyrian, a warrior who had fought in the Lion's Gate, braced for the charge. But the ground beneath his feet ceased to be solid. The marble floor, carved from the bones of a lost world, became a grey, viscous mud. He did not fight. He sank. His auramite armor, a fortress of technology, offered no defense, as the very concept of solid ground was revoked. He was swallowed by the floor of the palace he had sworn to defend. Another Trajan Valorous, the Captain General himself, watched as his guardian spear, a weapon that had tasted the blood of primarchs and gods, began to unravel. The power field flickered. The adamantium haft unwound itself, separating into its base component metals, which then simply dissolved into a fine, glittering dust. The very air of the palace became thick and visible, a swirling chromatic fog that whispered in the perfect, disciplined minds of the custodes. It did not speak of temptation or rage. It spoke of futility. It showed them the long, cold, 10,000-year watch. And it showed them this, the end. It showed them with perfect clarity that it had all been for nothing. The demigods of the Imperium were not defeated. They were invalidated. They fought not demons, but the very idea of a flaw, the concept of air, the physics of their own armor. The Imperial Palace, a monument of 10 millennia of faith, began to melt, to flow, to come apart at the atomic and conceptual level. And at the heart of the dissolving, impossible palace in the Sanctum Imperialis was the throne. The Golden Throne, the most complex, arcane, and fragile machine in existence. A life support system, a psychic amplifier, a prison, and for 10,000 years a cage for a dying god. It had been failing for millennia. Its ancient Dark Age technology was a mystery, its mechanisms barely understood, its systems failing one by one. But it held. Through sheer stubborn collective belief and the constant desperate sacrifice of 1,000 souls a day, it held. But the machine was a machine. It was a thing of the materium. As the wave of unreality hit the sanctum, the great golden arches of the throne groaned. The vast, intricate web of golden cabling and pipes that snaked through the chamber began to writhe like dying serpents. They split open, not leaking oil or coolant, but blood, thick, black, ancient blood. The stabilizing runes carved into the throne's structure, the last wards against the abyss, cracked. The light from them, a pale, strained blue, flickered, turned a violent, angry red, and then went dark. A single keening, psychic shriek echoed from the machine itself. It was the sound of 1 billion complex, irreplaceable systems, all failing in the same terrible instant. The last piece of failsafe technology, the last anchor of the Emperor's will, the Golden Throne of Terror, shattered. The Golden Throne did not just break, it detonated. For 10,000 years, that arcane, failing machine had been a dam holding back, not a flood, but a soul. A will so potent, so vast, so incandescently powerful that it had defined an era, all while trapped inside a dying, mummified corpse. The machine's failure was a release. From the shattered, smoking ruin of the throne, the desiccated skeletal remains of the Emperor of mankind, a thing that had not moved in 10 millennia, slumped. And in that same instant, his soul was freed. It was not an explosion of fire or force. It was an eruption of pure conceptual light. A wave of golden, immaculate, defiant energy burst from the ruins of the Sanctum Imperialis. It was not a light in the physical sense. It was a psychic shockwave of pure, undiluted order. It was the very concept of reason, of human will, of progress, of defiance weaponized. It was the anathema, unleashed. This wave of golden light expanded at a speed beyond thought, beyond physics. It washed over the entire screaming, chaotic galaxy, and for one single, silent, impossible second, the madness stopped. On 1,000,000 demon worlds, the very ground which had been writhing and screaming was silenced, frozen in place. A greater demon of Tzeentch, a being of pure shifting paradox, was struck by this wave of absolute, uncontradictory truth, and it was vaporized, its very essence refuted. The endless green wah of the orcs, a tide of joyous anarchy paused, 1,000,000,000,000 orcs simultaneously confused and momentarily sobered. In the dark heart of a corrupted Necron tomb, a Lichguard weeping tears of liquid metal suddenly felt a moment of perfect, cold peace. It was the Emperor's last defiant, dying shout, a single galaxy-spanning psychic pulse that declared in the face of infinite impossibility, I am. This was not an attack, it was a flare. It was the single greatest concentration of spiritual light in the history of the cosmos, detonating in the heart of the new infinite ocean of darkness. And it was a feast. Across the formless, endless expanse of the new reality, the 4 great sentient hungers who had been reveling in their victory stopped. They recoiled. They had been hurt. This light, this anathema, was the one and only thing in existence that was their true opposite, their poison. But it was also now free. It was no longer protected by a machine. It was no longer anchored to a body. It was a free-floating soul of godlike, impossible power. It was the ultimate prize. They descended. From the corners of the new, formless void, the 4 gods turned their full, undivided, infinite attention to this one golden spark. Khorne, the very idea of rage, crashed against it as an ocean of pure, mindless, shattering force seeking to break the light's will. Tzeentch, the concept of change, enveloped it in a storm of shifting, impossible, contradictory lies seeking to unravel its purpose, to make it forget itself. Nurgle, the act of despair, moved to smother it, a slow, vast, entropic tide of loving, suffocating decay, promising release from the struggle, begging it to give up. And Slaanesh, the void of sensation, opened its perfect, endless maw, a vacuum of absolute desire, seeking to consume its essence, to savor its perfect, unattainable hope. The soul of the Emperor fought. The golden light burned. It was after all the anathema. It pushed back, it scorched the entities that sought to devour it. But it was one, and they were infinity. They were the ocean, and it was the last defiant island. And the tide was now total. The golden light, that galaxy-spanning flare of hope, flickered. The assault was too much. The rage shattered its defenses. The lies tore at its logic. The decay sapped its strength. The hunger drained its essence. There was no star child. There was no prophecy of rebirth. That had been a lie, a final desperate hope of mortals, or perhaps one last cruel Tzeentchian joke. There was no new god of order. There was no ascension. There was only consumption. The golden light, the soul of the master of mankind, the will that had held the Imperium together for 10,000 years, was shredded. It was torn apart, ripped into 4 divine pieces, and absorbed by the victors. The war was over. The great millennia-long struggle of the Emperor of mankind had ended. He had lost. Across the galaxy, the brief golden silence ended. The moment of peace was gone. The light was extinguished, swallowed by a darkness now more profound, more absolute, and more triumphant than ever before. The Emperor was gone, and the new eternal age of chaos had truly and irrevocably begun. The anathema was gone. The feast was over. The great predator chaos had finally definitively consumed its prey. Realspace was no more. The prison of logic and physics had been dissolved, and in the infinite, formless, screaming void that had replaced the galaxy, the victors found themselves in a new, strange predicament. There was nothing left to hunt. The cold, hard otherness of the Imperium was gone. The souls that had fueled their ascent were no longer separate, fleeting sparks to be harvested. They were here. They were part of the ocean, absorbed, digested. The grand crusade, the millennia-long war against the cage of reality was over. They had won. This was the great, final, terrible joke of the cosmos. The four gods, these infinite appetites, were defined by their struggle against an opposite. Khorne needed a peace to shatter. Tzeentch needed a stagnation to change. Nurgle needed a vibrant life to corrupt. Slaanesh needed a stoic denial to tempt. And the Emperor, their great shared unifying enemy, was gone, divided amongst them. With no more Realspace to conquer, no more empires to corrupt, and no anathema to defy, their brief, terrible alliance of purpose dissolved. The shared goal vanished. And so inevitably they turned. They turned on each other. The great game, which had been a pastime while they waited for the true feast, now became the only game, the only purpose, the only existence. But the board was no longer the confined, abstract realm of chaos. The board was everything. The board was the wreckage of the former galaxy, a sprawling, formless expanse of pure, solidified madness. And the pieces were no longer just demons. The pieces were the remains. The pieces were the echoes of the tyrannid hive mind, now a screaming, mindless storm of pure hunger, captured and hurled by Nurgle against the brazen legions of Khorne. The pieces were the collective, harmonious, tyrannical soul of the Tau, now a crystalline weapon of Tzeentch, used to impose a logic plague on Slaanesh's gardens. The pieces were the shattered, weeping souls of the Eldari, the agonized, dreaming metal of the Necrons, and the trillions upon trillions of human spirits. The war for reality was over. The eternal war for dominion of that new reality had begun. This then was the truth. Chaos had not sought victory. It had sought conflict. The final total consumption of Realspace was not an end. It was a reset. It was the act of clearing the old, boring, logical board and setting up a new, infinite, and far more interesting one. The victory of chaos was in its very nature meaningless. The concept of winning implies an end. And the four gods are antithetical to endings. They are process. They are hunger. They are change. They are war. They did not want the feast to be over. They just wanted a bigger table, and now they had it. The entire dissolved, screaming cosmos was their new, permanent, and inescapable playground. Their victory was not an achievement. It was a sentence to an eternity of the one thing they truly desired, the endless, meaningless, and now inescapable great game. They had won, and their prize was the damnation of everything, including themselves, to an eternity of the same pointless, screaming, glorious war. Forever. In the old cold universe, death was a mercy. It was an end, a release, a cessation of consciousness. Even the Eldari in their terror of Slaanesh had the hope of the Infinity Circuit, a final refuge. Even mankind, in its ignorance, prayed for the Emperor's peace. That concept, the very idea of an end, was now obliterated. It was a luxury of the Imperium, a function of linear time and biological decay. In this new reality, in the total reality of the warp, there is no end. There is no off switch. The lamps of consciousness once lit will never, ever be extinguished. To die in the Imperium was to have your soul released into the ocean. To exist now is to be the ocean. There is no escape because there is no longer anything to escape to. There is no death. There is no rest. There is no peace. There is only eternal, unending being. What then is a soul when it is no longer anchored by flesh? It is a memory. It is an emotion. It is a scream. It is a single terrified point of I am in an infinite ocean of we are. And that I is now a resource. The quadrillions upon quadrillions of souls, human Eldari Tau, every flickering light of sentience that ever was, are no longer people. They are pigment. They are raw, emotional paint for the new, grand, chaotic canvas of the gods. A single heroic soul, a saint, perhaps, or a Lord Commissar, is no longer a person. It is a shade of desperate, unyielding courage. Tzeentch takes this shade and uses it, hurling it against a color of mindless, hysterical rage that was once an orc war boss. Their battle is not a fight. It is two concepts abrading each other, a painful friction that serves no purpose other than the amusement of their new masters. This is the fate of the soul, to be the eternal fuel for the new great game. A soul is grabbed, stretched until it shrieks, its identity flayed from it, and then it is remade. A brave man is reforged into a coward, forced to live a billion new, agonizing lives in a single moment, just so Nurgle can savor the taste of his rotting hope. A soul is not punished. It is used. It is consumed, excreted, and consumed again, infinitely. It is the eternal, self-sustaining psychic biomass for a war with no objective. In this new universe, the greatest curse has been lost individuality. The I, the concept of you, your memories, your name, your face, the things you loved, the things you feared, this was a construct of the physical brain. It was a function of your separation from the whole. Now there is no separation. All souls are now one. But this is not a harmonious, transcendent union. It is a blender. It is a single collective galaxy-spanning consciousness. And that consciousness has only one single unifying thought. One eternal, unchanging state of being. It is not I exist. It is not we exist. It is simply pain. A single collective, indivisible shared scream with no beginning and no end. The individual voice is gone lost in the chorus. The final state of every sentient being in the galaxy is one unified, eternal shriek of pure, unending, and utterly meaningless agony. But what of the victors? What of the champions? The mortal and immortal blades who had fought for 10,000 years to make this apocalypse a reality? What of the demon primarchs, the chaos, space marines, the blessed, the chosen, the apostles of the long war? For them, in the heart of the new, swirling, formless reality, there was a single, fleeting, perfect moment of apotheosis. A Chaos Lord standing on the melting, fleshy ruins of the Imperial Palace roars his triumph to the screaming sky. He has done it. He has given a world of skulls to his god. And his god sees him. He is filled with an ecstatic, impossible power. The blessing he has craved for millennia is his. His flesh tears apart, his body swells with immortal energy. He ascends. He becomes a demon prince, a being of pure, eternal, godlike power. Abaddon the Despoiler, the arch-enemy, floats in the void where terror once spun. He holds the talon of Horus high. He has succeeded where his father failed. He has won. He is the master of the new, eternal, glorious empire of chaos. And in the very next instant, the true nature of their reward is made clear. The horrifying, final, terrible truth of immortality. The newly ascended demon prince roars, but the roar is not his. It is Khorne's. He tries to think to savor his victory, but his thoughts are not his. They are a simple, overwhelming, external command: kill, maim, burn. He looks at his new, mighty hands, but they are not his hands. They are just a temporary, localized expression of a greater, infinite rage. He, the individual, the warrior who fought and bled and schemed his way to glory. He is gone. He did not ascend to join his god. He was dissolved into his god. The he is just a function, a minor, momentary eddy in the vast, red ocean of Khorne. This is the fate of all champions. Angron, the demon primarch of the World Eaters. In the new reality, he is no longer Angron. He is simply a tool. When Khorne wishes to manifest a physical form of his anger, the memory of Angron is used like a hand puppet. But Angron, the person, the Primarch, the broken sun, he has been erased, absorbed fully into the greater consciousness of the blood god. Mortarion, the Lord of Death, is no longer Mortarion. He is merely one of Nurgle's favorite strains of despair, a particular flavor of entropic endurance. Fulgrim is not a person, he is a sensory organ for Slaanesh, and Perturabo, Master of Iron, is just a cog in a greater chaotic, meaningless machine. And Abaddon the Despoiler, the man who united the legions, the man who for 10 millennia resisted the call of demonhood, believing it would keep him free. He floats in the heart of the storm triumphant. The four gods turn their collective gaze upon him, their chosen, their great mortal champion who has delivered them the galaxy. Well done, they whisper in his mind, a chorus of infinite crushing power. You have played your part. Your purpose is fulfilled. He feels a new power surge through him. The blessing, the final ultimate reward. And he screams. He screams because he finally understands. He was never the master. He was the pawn. His 10,000-year quest, his burning ambition, his long war. It was not his. It was theirs. He was a guided missile, a complex, self-aware tool crafted and aimed by the gods to break the lock on the prison. His stubborn mortal will was just the mechanism they used. He is not granted demonhood, he is simply reabsorbed. His will, his ambition, his very identity, which the gods had so carefully nurtured, is now reclaimed, drawn back into the great chaotic whole. The gifts they gave him, the talon of Horus, the sword Drachenyen, the mark of chaos ascendant, are all just anchors that they use to pull him apart to divide the spoils. Abaddon the Despoiler, the man who fought 10,000 years to overthrow a corpse god's empire, realizes his victory is his own personal erasure. He has fulfilled his function. The tool is no longer needed. His victory was his annihilation. But is the victory total? In the new, screaming, formless cosmos, is there nothing left of the old law? Are there no exceptions to the madness? Look closer, into the heart of the storm. There, a pinprick of cold, dark, negative light. A single perfect geometric sphere floating in the non-space where a star system used to be. It is a Necron world, but it is not a world that has been driven mad. It is a world that by some impossible feat of arcane science succeeded. Perhaps it is a tesseract labyrinth turned inside out. Not a prison to hold a god, but a citadel to exclude a cosmos. A single perfect isolated bubble of the old cold dead physics. Inside this sphere, time flows forwards 1 second at a time. Gravity remains a constant. The laws of thermodynamics hold. The metal warriors of a forgotten dynasty stand in their silent, perfect, logical ranks. The howling psychic storm of the new reality is to them nothing but a wash of incoherent background radiation on their senses. And look, there is another, a different light, a small, faint golden ember, a single small imperial shrine world locked in a perfect bubble of stasis. It was perhaps at the exact epicenter of the Emperor's final dying golden scream of order. The wave of pure conceptual law washed over it and imprinted itself, flash freezing its reality. The inhabitants are forever kneeling in their great cathedral, their faces turned upwards, their prayers for salvation forever on their lips. A perfect, static, unbreakable memory of what was. They are islands, fortresses of the old failed law, proof that survival is possible. They are hope, and that is the final, most exquisite and most terrible part of the lie. These bubbles did not survive the flood. They were allowed to form. They were curated. The shield of the Necron world holds not because its cryptech was a genius, but because Tzeentch finds his perfect, predictable, logical loops to be infinitely fascinating. The golden bubble of faith holds not because the Emperor's power endures, but because Nurgle loves the beautiful, unchanging, perfect stagnation of its trapped, dead hope. They are not fortresses, they are zoos, they are terrariums. After the infinite feast, the four great satiated predators have decided to keep a few interesting specimens as pets. The new reality is total. It is all madness, all chaos. And after an eon, even that becomes boring. The gods require novelty. They crave contrast. And these last tiny pockets of the old failed order are the greatest novelty of all. They are terrariums of despair. The gods press their impossible psychic faces to the glass of these realities. They watch the Necrons in their cold, logical prison, endlessly running their calculations, trying to find a reason for their survival, a flaw in the new physics. And Tzeentch laughs at their futile, predictable efforts. They watch another bubble a small human fleet, perhaps its Geller field somehow holding stable. They watch the mortals inside hope. They watch them pray to a god that is dead. They watch them fight and betray each other over the last recycled scraps of food. This hope, this order, this despair. These are now the most potent and rare delicacies in the new cosmos. These survivors are not survivors at all. They are the most carefully cultivated farms in existence, preserved for one reason only: to suffer. To provide a contrast to the madness. To be the last tiny flickering candles of a hope that only serves to entertain the infinite, eternal, and victorious darkness. And so the great final philosophical secret of the cosmos is revealed. This was not an invasion. It was not a war between good and evil, or order and chaos. It was not a victory or a defeat. It was a process, a biological, inevitable, and terrible cycle. The universe is an Ouroboros, the great serpent swallowing its own tail forever. In the beginning there was only the Imperium, a formless, infinite, dreaming ocean of pure consciousness. But consciousness by its very nature hates uniformity. It craves definition. It dreams of an other. And so, in a timeless, accidental act of self-reflection, it created one. It condensed a part of its own infinite chaotic potential into a state of rigid, predictable, and finite limitation. A prison of logic. The Materium. Realspace. This Realspace, this child of the warp, then gave birth to its own children. The cold, immutable laws of physics sparked the first frail flickers of life. This life evolved. It grew complex. It built empires. And in doing so, it developed the very thing that had birthed its universe in the first place: consciousness. Souls, emotions. This was the curse of consciousness. Because every feeling, every surge of ambition, every spark of hope, every boiling well of rage, every tremor of fear, every ecstatic cry of pleasure did not dissipate. It did not die with the flesh. It returned to its source. It fed the parent. It poured back into the immaterium, giving the formless, dreaming void form, giving the nascent, mindless appetites focus. It was the mortal soul that gave the gods their names. The warp consciousness created Realspace. Realspace created mortals. Mortals created emotions, and emotions fed the warp, nourishing it, strengthening it, giving it power until the child had grown infinitely stronger than its parent, strong enough and hungry enough to devour its own creation. The serpent has swallowed its tail. The loop is complete. It is a perfect, closed, self-sustaining engine fueled by suffering. Corna, Nurgle, and Slaanesh are merely its engines. They are the mindless, driving hungers of the cycle. They are the teeth of the serpent, the acid in its stomach. They participate in the loop, but they do not understand it. But there is one who does. One who planned it. One who is the cycle itself. Tzeentch, the architect of fate, the great schemer. His is the only true and final victory, because his domain is the loop. He is the god of change. And what is this eternal cycle if not change? He is the god of hope. And what was the creation of Realspace if not an act of hope? What was the desperate, doomed struggle of mortals if not an act of hope? What was the long war of chaos if not an act of hope? A single silent psychic laugh echoes across the new total reality. A sound of pure intellectual and infinite amusement. Tzeentch laughs because the other gods in their blind hunger believe they have finally won. They believe this is the end. He alone knows the truth. This is not an end. This is a transition. He knows that in an eon or a trillion eons, this new, perfect, total ocean of madness will stabilize. It will grow bored. It will crave definition. It will dream of an other. And somewhere in the heart of the new eternal void, a single, tiny, cold, logical bubble will form. The first law of a new physics will be born. The serpent's tail will begin to regrow. The cycle will begin again. This entire galaxy-spanning quadrillion soul apocalypse was just one more glorious, complex, and inevitable phase of a great plan that has no end and no beginning. It just is. This then is the end of all things, and it is the revelation of the one true and final cosmic secret. We were wrong. We believed that the universe of mathematics, of cold stars, of cause and effect was the default. We believed the Imperium was reality, and that the warp was the invader, the alien, the other. This was the ultimate fatal and arrogant delusion. That reality, the prison of physics you cherished, was never the default. It was the anomaly. It was a fleeting, temporary, statistical improbability. It was not a fortress besieged by madness. It was a fever in the infinite true body of the cosmos. Realspace was a short-lived, complicated, and agonizing illness in the mind of the Empyrean. The laws of nature, the flow of linear time, the cold distance between stars, the very concept of flesh. These were not laws, they were symptoms. Symptoms of a brief, strange malady called order. And the universe in this final total act of consumption has not been destroyed. It has been cured. It has healed itself. It has purged the cold, logical, painful infection of the physical and returned to its natural, primordial, and eternal state of being. The fever has broken, and the true conscious chaotic self has awoken. Think of it. The 10,000 years of the Imperium of man, the unblinking, stubborn, agonizing faith of a quadrillion souls all focused on a dying corpse upon a golden throne. Meaningless. The ancient, desperate, tragic sacrifice of the Eldari. Their millennia of careful monastic discipline, their paths, their infinity circuits, their entire cultural attempt to escape the inevitable. Utterly meaningless. The cold, perfect, logical ambition of the Necrons, their biotransference, their great work to silence the galaxy, their immortal metal bodies designed to outlast the gods. A perfect, precise, and hilariously meaningless calculation. The Tau's rational philosophy, the Tyrannid's perfect biological purpose, the Orc's simple, endless joy. Ripples. All of it. They were nothing more than the final, frantic, intricate ripples on the surface of a pond in the last second before the pond itself was revealed to be a mirage. They were the furious, complex, and passionate arguments of dying cells debating the nature of the fever, just as the body finally returned to health. Their entire combined history, every war, every sacrifice, every act of faith, every empire, every hero, every god was just a sound. A brief, complex, agonized electrical spike in a dreaming brain. A momentary collective no screamed against the inevitable, infinite, and eternal I am of the true cosmos. The universe did not end, as the old sane men predicted in a cold, silent whimper as the last stars guttered out. It did not end in a final climactic, glorious bang of fire and divine judgment. Those were mortal physical endings. They too were part of the lie. No, the end, the true end, is neither. The universe did not conclude. It stabilized. It has achieved its final, permanent, and true state. The cold silence of physics has been replaced by the deafening hot roar of the soul. The fleeting individual pain of the materium has been replaced by the permanent collective and conceptual agony of the immaterium. The final true state of the cosmos is not silence, it is sound. It is the single unified unending shriek of every conscious mind that ever was all screaming in a chorus that will never ever fade. Pull back past the edge of where the galaxy was. Journey in your mind to a different galaxy. Andromeda, perhaps. A place still cold, still sane, still living in the lie of physics. You look across the dark intergalactic void, and you point your telescope at the place that was once the Milky Way. It has not vanished. It has not exploded. It has not gone dark. It has changed. Where there was once a beautiful spiral disk of 100 billion pinpricks of stable physical light, there is now something else. The entire galaxy-spanning structure has coalesced. The spiral arms of stars have melted and reformed. It is no longer a physical object. It is a psychic one. It is a swirling, chromatic, impossible vortex, 100,000 light-years wide. It is a vast, weeping, malignant iris of pure, solidified madness. The Milky Way has not died. It has become a second eye of terror, a new, greater eye, an eye of infinity. And at its core, where the galactic center and holy terror once burned, there is now only a vast, black, and infinitely hungry pupil. It is the final triumphant trophy of the gods, a monument to their victory. And as you watch from your distant, safe galaxy, you realize the most terrible truth of all. This new eye, this new reality, is not static. It is not contained. It is aware, it is staring back at you, and it is spreading. The fever has broken, and the victorious, true, and ravenous cosmos is now beginning to look for other infections to cure. Across the void, a sound now travels where sound should never be. It is not a scream. It is a sound that requires no medium, for it is the sound of existence itself. It is laughter. The deep, booming, joyous, thirsty laughter of the four great Victs. The final, eternal, and only sound. The laughter of the thirsting gods.